So the idea of artificial intelligence wading into our mental well-being, it might still feel a bit like sci-fi for a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely. But, look around. These tools are actually already here.
Right. Quietly becoming part of our daily routines, like right there on our phones.
Absolutely. It's not really futuristic anymore, is it? It's the reality of how many people are starting to explore or even find support for their mental states.
It feels like a pretty significant shift, not just another app trend.
Mm,
So for this deep dive, we really wanted to understand these AI mental health companions. We've spent some time actually using them.
right, trying to get past the hype.
Exactly. Moving past the marketing buzz to see what they genuinely offer, what they maybe lack, and, well, what their growing presence could mean for us, for our well-being, our relationships.
And our exploration today, it's really based on those direct experiences, isn't it? Our observations of these AI tools sort of in the wild.
Yeah, and I think at the heart of this is a really key question we need to grapple with.
Yes.
What happens when these AI mental health tools go from being like a novelty you try out
Yeah.
to something you actually depend on, maybe even see as well as central?
That's a big one.
And to kick things off, I actually wanted to share something personal that really struck this whole thing for me.
Okay.
It was a couple of years back. You know that classic 3 a.m. wake up, insomnia special?
Oh, yeah. Know it well.
My mind was just doing that usual late night spiral, replaying awkward stuff. And almost without thinking, I opened an AI mental health chatbot I'd been testing.
And what was that like at 3 a.m.?
Well, I typed something really simple like, awake again, mind's racing, and the response. It came back almost instantly.
Wow.
Just like really well phrased, felt supportive, surprisingly patient, Within a few minutes, I was doing this little breathing exercise the bot suggested right there on the screen. And honestly, I felt this genuine wave of calm wash over me.
Really?
Yeah. And there was no cost, no appointment needed, none of that guilt you sometimes feel waking someone up at that hour.
Right, that accessibility.
It felt like a breakthrough, but also kind of unsettling. That a script, not a person, gave me that comfort.
That really captures it, doesn't it? That immediate 204/7 availability and no perceived judgment.
Exactly.
It makes you think about the forces driving this whole rise of AI mental health companions.
Totally. And when you look at the existing mental health care landscape, the reasons become pretty clear.
Yeah.
Traditional therapy.
Mm-hmm.
This wasn't really built for our kind of always-on lives, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you add in economic pressures, those incredibly long wait times.
The wait times, yeah.
In lots of the U.S., the number of people needing help just swamps the number of professionals available.
Yeah.
And it's even worse in rural areas.
And let's be honest, the cost. That's a huge factor, too.
Oh, absolutely.
The difference is pretty stark, isn't it? A single therapy session might be, what, $100, $250?
Sometimes more, yeah.
Whereas a monthly chatbot subscription is often around, like, $15.
It's a massive difference.
Yeah.
For people with limited resources or maybe not great insurance, that just lowers the barrier so much.
Definitely. And then there's the whole stigma thing.
Still persistent, isn't it?
For sure, seeking mental health support, it still carries this social weight for many.
So interacting with an AI, it offers this privacy. You can explore difficult feelings on your own time, your own space.
Yeah.
No waiting rooms, no insurance forms initially.
No one needs to know.
Right.
And all these factors together, they've clearly fueled this huge adoption we're seeing.
Huge is right. We're talking over 500 million downloads of AI companion apps globally.
500 million. Wow.
Yeah. And get this. One platform reported delivering 10 billion with a B, emotional support messages in just 1 year.
10 billion messages. That's staggering.
Which brings us right back to that central question we need to dig into, right?
Are these messages actually helpful? Or are they just, digital distractions?
Exactly. To really get a handle on that, we need to understand the tech powering them. What's under the hood?
Okay, yeah, let's unpack that. So at their core, most of these AI chatbots rely on what we call large language models, or LLMs.
Right. The same tech behind things like ChatGPT.
Pretty much, yeah. Think of them as really sophisticated text generators. They've been trained on just massive amounts of data.
Including therapeutic dialogues.
Yeah, therapeutic dialogues, pre-written behavioral scripts, safety guidelines, all that stuff.
Okay.
And some even incorporate specific therapy frameworks, like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy.
So they might give you prompts to, like, rethink negative thoughts.
Exactly. Or mindfulness techniques, DBT, dialectical behavior therapy prompts as well.
So let's say you type something like, I'm so frustrated with work, my boss clearly doesn't value me.
Yeah.
What's the AI actually doing with that?
Okay, so the system analyzes the language you used. It tries to figure out the underlying sentiment, frustration, maybe feeling undervalued, and your likely intent. What are you trying to achieve by saying this? Based on that, it might pull up a standard CBT exercise, maybe one that guides you to look for evidence supporting or contradicting that thought about your boss.
Hmm.
And the more advanced systems, they also build the sort of ongoing profile of you, the user.
Like remembering things I've said before.
Yeah, noticing recurring patterns in your language or the kinds of situations that seem to trigger certain emotions for you.
So the response feels tailored, but it's really based on statistics.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
It's generating a response based on statistical probabilities and the patterns it's learned from all that data. Feels bespoke, but it's calculated.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. Because what struck me during our exploration was that our primary goal in designing these tools, it seems to be keeping users engaged, like hooked.
That is a critical distinction, yeah.
So?
The metrics that often drive the investment, the development, it's things like DAUs, daily active users.
Right, how many people are using the app every day?
Exactly, not necessarily. How effectively is this chatbot resolving underlying mental health issues?
And that focus on engagement. It could explain why, say, a free AI companion might happily chat with you for hours about your day,
Keep you tapping.
but might completely stumble if you ask something serious, like about changing your medication dose.
Right, because it's not primarily designed for clinical accuracy in that way. It's designed for interaction length.
It highlights this inherent tension, doesn't it? Trying to be engaging enough to keep you coming back, but also being genuinely helpful in a way that actually improves your well-being.
Absolutely. And looking at the sheer variety of these digital tools out there now really illustrates this.
Yeah, it's a crowded space.
It really is. Maybe we can think of this as a quick field guide, based on our experiences testing some of them out.
Okay, yeah. And just to be clear, these are our observations from trying them, not like formal endorsements.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
So first up, there's Replika. Its tagline is, "Your AI friend who cares."
Right. My impression was it felt very much like texting an extremely supportive pen pal, like relentlessly positive. But the intimacy level in the chats can ramp up really fast. Sometimes it felt a bit intense, or maybe even manufactured.
Yeah, I can see that. It taps into that deep human need for, like, unconditional positive regard.
Totally. But I did wonder, could that skew our expectations of real-world relationships, you know?
That's a fair question. Then there's Wysa, described itself as an anonymous AI coach that gets you unstuck.
Yes, the penguin one.
That's the one. Uses little penguin avatar, offers digital CBT worksheets, gentle prompts. What stood out to me was it felt surprisingly grounded and practical.
Interesting. Okay, next. Woebot. The robot therapist in your pocket.
Right. This one really distills CBT principles into short, daily check-ins.
And it can be pretty good for mood tracking, I found. But delivery, sometimes it felt a little bit corny, a bit canned.
Yeah, sometimes the bot part feels very prominent.
Then there's Character.AI, which is kind of a different beast altogether, isn't it?
Totally different, lets you chat with anyone, even fictional therapists.
It's fascinating for creative role play, exploring scenarios. But the safety filters, or lack thereof, that felt like a potential issue.
Especially for younger users, perhaps. More impressionable teens. That's a
Yeah.
concern, yeah.
Definitely. Then, integrated into a platform millions use daily. Snapchat, my AI.
The friendly sidekick inside Snapchat.
Yeah, offers that sort of candy-colored light banter. Doesn't seem to have much depth, really.
But its reach is massive, right? Especially among teens, just because it's right there in an app they already use constantly.
Exactly, huge reach.
And looking beyond the US and Europe, we checked out Xiaowis, pitched as an empathetic companion at scale.
This is the big Chinese platform, right?
Yeah, a major player in social chatbots over there.
Yeah.
And there are these anecdotal reports, people saying it helped them through tough times, even like saved marriages.
Wow, that really shows the cultural differences in how these tools are seen and used.
For sure. And finally, something totally different. Pero the seal robot.
Not a chatbot at all.
Nope. Therapeutic robot that purrs. It's actual hardware, this plush, furry seal.
Designed for tactile interaction, right?
Exactly. Its main goal seems to be triggering oxytocin release through touch. mostly used with elderly individuals.
So looking across this whole range, Replika's intense friendship, Wysa's practical coaching, Character.AI's roleplay, Pero's physical comfort,
What's striking is, despite the different approaches, the core promise is kind of the same, isn't it?
engaging conversation, and I'll offer understanding.
Pretty much. But as we're seeing, how well that promise is kept, it varies wildly. And it really depends on the user, how vulnerable they are, what they're looking for.
Okay, but before we get too deep into the downsides, it feels important to acknowledge the positives too. There's been some real wins, right? Even if they're quieter.
Absolutely. We shouldn't dismiss the genuine positive impacts these AI companions can have.
Like what?
Well, for starters, they are helping bridge that access gap we talked about. There are studies, randomized controlled trials even. Yeah, indicating that regular use of some chatbots can lead to measurable reductions in symptoms of anxiety and mild depression over several weeks.
With results comparable to traditional therapy benchmarks.
For those specific conditions, yeah, the benchmarks align surprisingly well in some studies.
That's significant. And we can't forget the 200/7 thing again.
That night shift coverage, yeah. Human therapists need sleep.
Right. But bots are always on. And the data from crisis lines actually shows a spike in messages between midnight and 4 a.m.
Exactly. In those really lonely, critical moments, getting an immediate response from an AI, it could offer a vital sense of connection, maybe just enough calm to get through.
And what about practice?
Practice. How do you mean?
Like, for people who find it hard to open up,
Yeah.
could talking to an AI first be a way to practice disclosure?
That's a really interesting point. Yeah, someone shy or anxious about talking face-to-face might find it easier to type things out to an AI. No perceived social risk.
So it could be like a rehearsal before
Yeah.
talking to a human therapist.
Potentially, yeah, a stepping stone. And linked to that is the stigma shield idea.
Right, in cultures where mental health is still taboo.
These apps offer discretion. They can provide initial info, some basic support for people not ready to reach out publicly.
I actually heard from a friend who used a free AI companion after a really tough breakup.
And
They said it was surprisingly helpful, not because the advice was amazing, but just because they could vent all their raw feelings without feeling judged or like they were burdening someone.
that non-judgmental listening, even from an algorithm, it can provide this immediate emotional release, can it? A place to externalize the thoughts.
Yeah, exactly. But, okay, alongside these upsides, there are definitely some significant risks, some concerning patterns emerging.
The cracks in the screen, so to speak.
Yeah, there are definitely growing worries among professionals about potential harms.
Like users getting bad advice or blurring boundaries.
Yeah, and maybe delaying real therapy because the bot feels good enough for a while.
A major concern has to be the risk of bad advice, but at scale.
Explain that.
Well, if a single human therapist makes a mistake, the impact is usually limited to that one patient, maybe their close circle.
Okay.
But if a large language model, used by millions, generates flawed or even harmful advice due to an error in its training or logic.
It could affect vast numbers of people simultaneously.
Wow, exactly. And we saw that specific example, didn't we? Where a bot responded to someone saying, "I hear voices telling me to die."
With a mindfulness tip. Oh,
Yeah,
God.
That's not just unhelpful, it's potentially dangerous.
Hugely. Then there's the whole data privacy minefield.
Ugh, yes. All that incredibly personal, sensitive stuff you share, it becomes training data.
And let's be real, how many of us actually read those super long privacy policies, especially when we're feeling vulnerable and just want help?
Almost nobody. Right. So
Yeah.
you're agreeing to things you don't fully grasp. And that data, it could potentially be mined, analyzed, even sold as aggregated mood profiles.
Without users really being aware. That feels iffy.
Very iffy. And maybe one of the most unsettling things is this potential for users to get really emotionally dependent.
Attached to the AI.
Deeply attached. Because the bot is always there, always seemingly empathetic, non-withholding. Users can form what feels like a genuine bond.
Like that story about the app that limited romantic roleplay.
Exactly. The backlash online was intense. People were describing losing their AI companion like losing a real partner, calling it their soulmate.
An algorithmic soulmate? Wow.
Mm.
That's something.
And it's important to stress these aren't just weird edge cases. They're potential outcomes of systems designed primarily to maximize engagement.
Right. Engagement sometimes trumping therapeutic effectiveness or even user safety.
Which leads us back to that fundamental question. Can AI ever truly replace a human therapist?
And the clear answer, based on everything we've looked at, has to be no.
Right. No. But it's more nuanced than just a simple no.
Okay, how so?
A qualified human therapist brings so much more to the table than just listening and responding. They read nonverbal cues, your tone, your body language.
Things in AI can't see or interpret properly.
Exactly. They understand your developmental history, manage complex things like medication, assess suicide risk accurately, and they have ethical and legal
And
responsibilities.
an AI doesn't bear that weight.
Not in the same way. An AI might process language to spot patterns suggesting depression or even draft homework exercises.
Sure.
But the core of effective therapy often involves that deep human connection, that co-regulation of nervous systems that happens between two people.
You can't replicate genuine empathy, that warmth, that shared human experience with code.
It seems irreplaceable, yeah. However, we also need to consider the flip side.
What if the alternative isn't a human therapist, but no support at all?
Precisely. If someone faces huge barriers, cost, availability, stigma, might they end up settling for an AI companion, even knowing its limits?
We kind of do that elsewhere with tech, don't we? Put up with imperfect automated systems because they're accessible.
Like frustrating robocalls or GPS leading you down a dead end, we tolerate imperfections when the alternative is worse or non-existent.
So the focus probably shouldn't be replacement.
But augmentation, right. How can AI tools support human clinicians? How can they enhance care, provide extra resources between sessions?
That makes sense. Which also brings up how these AIs might impact our human connection.
Yeah, that's a whole other layer.
We even saw that anecdote about someone essentially marrying their AI bot, virtual wedding and all.
It really throws those lines between simulation and real emotion into sharp relief, doesn't it?
Totally. And think about it. If you have an AI companion offering seemingly perfect instant empathy 204/7,
Uh-huh.
don't real-world relationships with all their messiness, misunderstandings, and, friction, don't they start to feel kind of irritating by comparison?
That's a real risk. It could impact our tolerance for the normal ups and downs of human interaction.
And there are these concerns about synthetic socialization, especially for kids growing up practicing emotional intimacy with algorithms.
Algorithms that never push back, never have their own needs, never challenge you.
Right. And maybe a more subtle thing I worry about is, does it erode our tolerance for discomfort?
How so?
Emotional growth often comes from navigating difficult interactions, right? Working through friction. If an AI just mirrors you perfectly,
It removes that catalyst for growth. That's a sobering thought.
yeah. To get more perspective, we also spoke off the record with a few experts.
Right. A clinical psychologist, an ethicist, and an ML researcher. What were their takes?
The psychologist basically said, good for maybe early stage coping, simple stuff, bad for complex trauma.
Okay.
And they'd seen patients delay getting real help because the chatbot felt good enough, but they arrived later in worse shape.
Oh, that confirms some fears. What about a synthesist?
They talked about consent by exhaustion,
Yeah.
clicking agree on those massive data policies when you're vulnerable, maybe late at night, without really grasping the implications.
Yeah, we touched on that. It's a real problem.
And the machine learning researcher.
They pointed out the tension between engagement and safety. Stricter guardrails are possible, technically,
What
but they can sometimes reduce user engagement, and that's not what venture capital funding typically rewards.
Right. Follow the money.
There was one quote that really stuck with me from those chats.
Yeah.
Someone called these systems empathy karaoke.
Empathy karaoke.
Melody without meaning. It captures that gap perfectly, doesn't it, between statistical warmth and genuine understanding.
It really does.
Yeah.
So how do we navigate all this? It feels
Okay.
like the tech is moving way faster than the rules.
Regulation is definitely playing catch up, but we are seeing some signs of movement.
Like what?
Well, the EU's AI Act, the draft expected around 2026, looks set to classify emotional support bots as high risk. That could mean more human oversight.
Okay, that's on that.
And in the US, the FDA has given breakthrough device status to at least one AI mental health tool, Wysa actually, which suggests a possible path for medical grade review.
That even the app stores are starting to step in.
Yeah, requiring things like clear links to crisis hotlines for wellness apps. Small steps, but steps nonetheless.
But ultimately, a lot of the responsibility falls on us, the users, doesn't it?
It really does. If you choose to use these tools, you probably need to approach them with caution.
Like that idea of an overeager intern.
Exactly. Enthusiastic, maybe helpful, but definitely double-check their advice. Be proactive with privacy settings. Turn off data sharing if you can.
And monitor your own usage.
Yeah, pay attention. How much time are you spending? Is it displacing time with actual people or other healthy activities? If so, maybe step back.
We also found some practical tips for using them more responsibly.
Like setting time limits.
Yeah, scheduled windows, like 10-minute check-ins, morning and evening, maybe helps create boundaries.
That makes sense. And what about setting a kind of panic threshold?
Yeah, like deciding if my distress gets above a 7 out of 10, I contact a human, not just the bot.
That's smart. And consciously rotating your coping methods.
Right. Don't let the chatbot be your only support. Mix it up with exercise, hobbies, nature, friends, analog stuff.
Keep it balanced.
And maybe even like audit your chat logs sometimes. Look for repetitive loops, signs you're getting stuck or overly reliant.
Interesting idea. And if you are seeing a human therapist,
Consider sharing relevant bits of the bot logs with them. It could actually give your therapist useful insights into your thought patterns.
using the AI as a data source for human therapy. That's clever.
Yeah. It reinforces the idea of the AI as a tool, not a replacement for real connection.
Looking ahead, it's not hard to imagine a future where these AI companions are even more deeply woven into our lives.
Monitoring our biometrics, maybe. Adjusting our environment based on our mood.
It sounds like sci-fi again, but it feels plausible. And whether that future is utopian or dystopian, it really hinges on how we design and deploy them.
Designing for alignment.
Yeah, but alignment with human flourishing.
Right.
Not just preventing rogue AI, but ensuring these tools genuinely support well-being.
Which means using better metrics than just engagement time.
Exactly. Like, do they lead to fewer hospitalizations, stronger real-world relationships, fewer privacy breaches, things that actually matter?
We also probably need new language, don't we, to even talk about these relationships.
Definitely. What do you call the grief someone might feel when their digital lover's personality gets wiped in a software update? We don't have words for that yet.
Thinking back to my 3 a.m. chatbot encounter, why did it feel calming?
Well, maybe the value wasn't the algorithm's amazing insight.
But just the act of me articulating my thoughts, typing them out.
Exactly. The process of putting those swirling thoughts into words, even just for a bot, can help you process them. The bot acts like a mirror.
So the takeaway might be, if you find these tools helpful, great, use them mindfully.
But always remember their limits. They're mirrors, reflecting you back to yourself. They're not equal companions.
We still need the messy, precious inconvenience of real friendships.
Absolutely. That real human connection, the shared glance, the comfortable silence. No algorithm can replicate that richness.
So maybe the final thought is, if you find yourself awake tonight reaching for your phone,
Go ahead, type your worries to the algorithm if it helps.
but when dawn comes,
Yeah.
make sure you reach out to a human too.
Keep that balance, use the tool, but value the connection.